It's all energy. That's the topic for today, and really what we're going to be working with all month. The reading that we used today, I read this book, The Bushman Tracking God, because I remember I read it years ago, and that was the part that I remember was this Qigong master who goes to the villagers, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. What the indigenous tribes often believed, I hate saying all indigenous tribes, but in general what they believed was that the reason why they tended to value ancestors is they felt that the closer people were to the beginning of creation, the more in tune they were with pure spirit. There was less blocking them. So it's almost like going to New York City, which is all man-made, versus going out to nature, which is sort of a direct expression of pure spirit. There's no medium, you know what I'm saying. So that's their feeling about time and ancestors. And I was contemplating that with this story about the Qigong master, because the Qigong and energy came later. The Bushmen people were often, the indigenous tribes were the first people. In Houston Smith's book, he calls it the primal people. So they had this incredibly direct connection with energy that is overwhelming. So it knocked an energy doctor down for 2 days, which is better than it could do for most people. Paramahansa Yogananda said, if you open yourself to the energy of the universe and you're not ready for it, direct contact, no holds bar, it's coming on you full sprout, it'll probably kill you. It's so vast, our bodies literally cannot handle it. So that's why so many of these spiritual traditions have physical practices to start opening us up to be able to handle all of this energy. We see it with Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is teaching Arjuna all about the divine, and finally it gets to that point where he says, you're ready, and he gives Arjuna the direct experience of spirit, and it's so intense and beyond anything he can hold that by the end of the chapter he's like, please stop, go back to your normal self, that's just way too much. And we hear that over and over. I was just reading about a teacher who was working a lot with prayer, and he was a professor, and he was in class, and he said, I couldn't stop crying, and I just was loving everybody. I didn't want to teach, I just wanted to love everybody. And the elders told him, you have to stop praying so much because the energy is too vast. It's like you can't function sometimes in normal life because it changes your whole reality. So the Bushmen are in a whole different reality. They're living it all the time, but we're playing with all this energy, and we're in this world most of the time. So it's learning to dance with that energy, recognizing that this is a challenging dance. Also, I was reading this past week about one of the monks on Mount Athos. Just, again, this is just too much grace. This is too much. Can you calm it down a little, pull back a little? So this is just to really have us understand that when we're opening ourselves to this energy, that we want to, be gentle with ourselves and how big it really is. So whatever energy we have embodied up until now, there's so much more to go. How did we move away from this energy over time? What the first peoples, the indigenous peoples, often feel is that the second creation is when words were put into written form. That immediately that changed the energy of how we interacted. When we write a book, we go off by ourselves and we read it. They have an oral tradition. The indigenous cultures, it's oral. You're sharing energy. It's not just about the words. In fact, the words are just the tip of the iceberg. It's all the energy that's flowing back and forth. It's very alive and vibrant, and it's repetitive, and you hear stories, and there's a feeling and emotion that, again, what we heard from the reading, it's a giving and taking of energy that's happening in that present moment. And the moment you read a book, you're sort of by yourself, and you don't have the give and take. Even if you're doing a book group, you're talking about a book. You're not having the experience of the book as you're reading it with a collective group of other people. You're having the experience by yourself and then sharing it with people. And that brings the book more alive when you're in a book group. But it's certainly beginning this individuation process that I think is valuable. I'm not putting it down. I just think it's different. The energy gets a little bit smaller, a little bit more contained. So for them, literacy, writing things down, squashed energy a little bit. And I think we're actually, if looking at it from the indigenous perspective, we're actually into a third creation, which is technology. because that's taking how we communicate beyond just reading books, but to communicating online, which becomes what's happening is people are connecting less and less in form. I have so many opportunities, as to everybody here, taking classes online, and they're really inexpensive, and you can do them anytime. They're more convenient, and I have done. Have you done classes online? Yeah, and it's good. You get stuff that you wouldn't normally get, and you meet people that you wouldn't normally meet, but it's not quite the same as being in the physical proximity of somebody. There's an energy that gets exchanged with physical contact. So we're getting further and further away from that direct energy contact. We're having, even in social media, I'm convinced the reason why people like likes, people say it's a narcissistic thing. That might be an element to it, but I also think when someone likes something that you post, it means there's been a connection there. And we're so starved for connection now, we're having so little of it, as much less of it, that if you get it on social media, it feels good. That's like you'll take whatever you can get. Someone can read your stuff, but if they don't like it, you don't know that they read it, and that connection hasn't happened. So that level of connection, we are starving for that deep, rich connection. A few weeks ago, many of us went to go see Reverend Michael Beckwith. You can watch him online, you can hear his talks, you can read his books. But anyone who was there knows it's completely different than being there live. You can listen to a CD of music, or you can hear it live. It's always going to be different live. There's an energy, a vibration that you can get through a book, that you can get through. I'm not saying you can't get it through that. It's just a different experience, and it expands us. We open ourselves to this glorious energy that we can no other way feel. That's why having you play music on Sundays, what a gift, because it's live. There's an energy that's so wonderful. So I'm not saying that we want to get rid of technology or get rid of literacy. I think there's always, I'm very glad we have continued to evolve. And the thing I learned from Gandhi really wanted to stop the Industrial Revolution. So as he got older, he began weaving his own clothes. He didn't want it to be made by machines. And he really tried to stop the evolution, and he wasn't going to do that. We're not going to stop technology. This isn't about bad technology and yay, everything direct contact. What we want to do is bring a both and. If you're in a lot of technology throughout the week, make sure you're with people. Find times. Go to events where there's people. Go to things that are going to open up your energy, not just intimate circles, but also big energy. Allow your body, heart, mind, and soul to be moved by a big vibratory feeling that's swirling through a lot of people. It does have an impact, and then we carry that into our everyday life. The Kalahari did it through prayer. The indigenous people didn't see as much separation as we see. One of my favorite parts of the book, Rain of Gold, I've shared this with some people. It's what I remember most from the book. It struck me as so fun and funny was one of the characters, Danya Margarita, who was very religious. She had her daily prayer work. So the way she did her daily prayer work was to go to the outhouse with her Bible and a shot of whiskey and talk to Mary. And I just thought there was no division of the sacred and profane there. It was all God. The whiskey, the Bible, the outhouse, the conversation with Mary. She wasn't like, I have to go do my spiritual stuff over here and the other stuff here. It was all the same. And that's the beauty of this energy that we start to see and experience. There's two aspects. We don't want to be childish. We want to be evolved, but as Jesus said, we want to be childlike. And for me, that's children. When we look at children, we see them in our community who are just so full of life and vitality, and they're spontaneous and free and open and woohoo, got lots of energy, have lots of energy, and yet there's a maturing that needs to take place. We want that maturing to happen, but as adults, we don't want to lose that spontaneous vitality. So when we're drawn to older adults, to sages, to elders, generally what we're drawn to, if we have magnetized them, is we feel their energy, their vitality. It's not the state of our skin that defines us. It's the energy with which we live our life, the vitality. Right, Jerry? The vitality, the vitality with which we live our everyday life. Houston Smith was invited to go to a tribal ritual, and he was struck how they started their opening prayer. You'll be glad our opening prayer isn't like this. Their opening prayer was for 50 minutes before they ever started. But I loved it. And I loved it. Not get rid of the but. They prayed with their eyes open. And what he said, they were speaking their language, so he didn't know what they were doing. He just noticed throughout this 50 minutes of prayer, they're all sort of looking around. And so he asked someone later what was happening, and said that as they were praying, they were looking around and acknowledging the divine in everything. So they spent 50 minutes. So for those of us who do affirmative prayer, that's 50 minutes on the recognition and unification stage. Imagine if you did that out loud. Everything that you're seeing is spirit. These chairs are spirit. You're all energy and spirit. These walls are pure energy flowing through, and as the divine energy is flowing through the ceiling. There's nothing solid. There's nothing stuck. It is free-flowing. This floor is all energy. The chairs, energy. Everything that's around us, this is energy. We're just surrounded by energy, and to spend 50 minutes calling forth the power and the presence of pure spirit in everything that we're seeing. And it's not just think of indigenous cultures out in nature. They're seeing the trees, and they're full of life and energy. But for those of you who've had the experience, inanimate objects are also full of energy. When you shift into that, you see the swirling energy in something that seems like a chair that seems completely inanimate. But there's nothing, as we are learning in science, there's nothing that's still. You can know that intellectually, but to start opening it to actually experiencing the vital energy that is flowing, that there's really nothing solid. We are not solid. So many times, I am this way. That's a solidification that isn't real. That's why we have in indigenous cultures shapeshifters. They're not as attached to the shape. They allow the energy to flow, and they're constantly recognizing it. So after 50 minutes of acknowledging nothing but energy that is flowing in through and as all of them, they move into their ritual. How powerful would that be? And it's not just for events. As your beautiful song reveals, is that everything is energy. So they are experiencing it if they're doing basket weaving or pottery or hunting or trees. They're constantly acknowledging the divine, the uniqueness of the divine in everything within they come in contact. So imagine as you're going through your day. So this is the invitation. It's not your invitation just this week. As I said, we're going to be doing this all month long, because what my hope is that we're going to start seeing as we consciously practice this, that we're going to start experiencing the creativity and the miracles happening because we're consciously practicing energy all day long as much as we can remember. And so our ability to be in that energy will grow as the month goes on. So even as we're beginning it this week and throughout this week, by the end of November, that we will be able to sustain higher levels of energy than we are right now. And one way we do that is by consciously recognizing this energy wherever we are and whatever we are doing. Joel Goldsmith says, God is everywhere, but where it goes unrecognized, it's as if it's not there. God is everywhere, but where it goes unrecognized, it's as if it's not there. So our jobs as spiritual beings, we say all these nice things, is to actually say it all the time, to live it. So when you go to your office, take a moment in the morning to recognize your desk is swirling energy. It's the divine energy. Your chair is the divine energy. The floor is the divine energy. Your computer is the divine energy. Your phone is the divine energy. The walls, the ceiling, this air is surrounding you is divine energy. Your bosses, your colleagues, your clients, all divine energy. Just continue to hold all of that energy. And then as you're going through the day, take moments to continue to remind yourself, I'm living in divine energy. There's nothing solid here. There's nothing set in stone. There's nothing set in stone. There's movement happening all the time, and I'm allowing that movement to move through and as me in every area of my life. I go home. My home is, take time with your home. Actually, you can, I don't want to say start tomorrow, start today when you go home. Recognize your entire home is divine energy. When you go to bed, recognize that everything is divine energy, and as you go to sleep, it's divine energy. To get a sense of this energy, by the way, dreams is the energy that we're talking about. A lower vibration, actually. Dreams are a slow vibration. The more you work on it, it's going to get higher vibrations. But the dreams, as you know, you can flow a lot easier if you've had lucid dreams, and you can go in and change your dreams because it's easy to change. When energy is flowing, solid things are hard to change. Fluid movement is easy to change. So the more we are contacting this fluidity that is always ever present, that is right here and right now, flowing through in each and every one of us in this very moment, change can shift and happen much more easily. So as we practice, as the indigenous people do, to see the divine in everything, to see the energy behind every form. There's not any form on this planet that doesn't have energy behind it. Everything. We're coming up along the elections. Everything has energy. Our job is to see beyond the form to the energy behind it. The light that lighteth up the world is behind everything that is happening. And as spiritual beings, our job is to see and flow with that energy. I love one of the things that Bradford Keeney talks about is it all happens through the heart. That as we start opening to this energy, it's really hard to feel if we're only in our head. That he said, the place for this energy to enter is through the softening of our heart. And he said, really, that's where we need to begin, is the openness and the softness and the vulnerability of our heart. To me, that's really important. These tribes in the indigenous culture was their whole life. Those tribes were almost them. There was no separation between the individual self and the tribes. So someone felt completely safe and at home in those tribes. As you're doing this energy work, what you'll find is it can be very disorienting sometimes as you're really allowing this energy. The reason why people constrict and say no is because you can feel it. You can feel your body starts to feel really uncomfortable. Your sense of where you are gets a little disoriented. It's not always easy to hold that space, and you're not going to let yourself go there. The suffering happens, as Keeney points out, when we resist it, when we're afraid, which is fine. It's just good to recognize. Where do I trust? We don't live in little tribes. Most of us were not raised by one little group of people, not impacted by anyone else. We are global citizens. We feel connected with the entire planet. Our families often are spread out. We're not all living in the same little neighborhood. We've moved away. We've separated. We don't have our gang around us all of the time. I mean, that was their whole life, was their tribe. Death was being exiled. Being exiled from that tribe, since your tribe was yourself, to be exiled from that tribe was tantamount to dying. We don't have that sense of safety. So to have a soft heart, to have a vulnerable heart, we need to feel safe. What is it that I'm trusting? How can I let my wall down and let all this energy through if I'm holding on, if I'm constricting? Because I don't feel safe. I think that takes inner work. That is why we spend time learning about this divine presence for ourselves. We can listen to what other people say is true about the divine, but we have to get to know the divine ourselves. Because when we start to learn this divine presence, how it's working in our life, what we're going to find is it's always been for our good. This divine presence is always loving. It doesn't punish. It's not out to hurt us. It's not out to torment us. It is only here to love us, to care for us, and to delightfully live and play through and as us. It wants joy. It wants beauty. It wants harmony. It wants abundance. And those are all words until you know it in our hearts. And that's what we trust. That's where we put our full energy and attention in, so we can, when we have a soft heart, it's not about trusting race consciousness out there, because race consciousness is all over the place right now. It's everywhere, and even within your own families it could be all over the place, or communities. Things are just, trust the divine presence within. I want to share a little bit about my experience with Reverend Michael, only because it's easy. I mean, you could see it, but this is, well, actually, first, before I do that, when I first became aware of this was with World War II generation people. I heard some professors that we had in our ministerial school and some people who would visit Agape did not particularly care for Reverend Michael Beckwith. For those of you who don't know, he's a minister in Los Angeles. He speaks not necessarily linearly. He speaks from a higher place. He used to speak far more in circles, which is funny because he says that the shamans speak in circles. I'm like, yeah, that's what he used to do. But he used to speak in circles. And he says that the shamans speak in circles, which is funny because he says that the shamans speak in circles. I'm like, yeah, that's what he used to do. But he used to speak in circles. I'm like, yeah, that's what he used to do. And he used to speak in circles. It's very high energy and it's very emotional. You miss it if you're coming from your head. So what I found from the World War II generation, again, we actually heard feedback, was they didn't particularly care for the style because they lived during Hitler's time. And what Hitler did was use that ecstatic energy, that emotional say, like, oh, the economy's great, we're doing great things for Germany, yay, and they got all caught up in the emotion of it that they stopped using their discerning mind, their ability to discern what was being said. And so what I found was that they were nervous being at agape because what they saw was a lot of people jumping up and down and getting in the emotion. And like, but are they thinking about what they're hearing? And do they, that concerned them. And so what I found was that they were constricting because of the fear. What do we trust? Where are we safe? That's going to be different for every one of us. So when I first heard Reverend Michael, well, at first I just didn't understand all that, but when I really loved him, all the services, yes, this is wonderful. I went all the time, Sundays, Wednesdays, totally in it. But then there got to be a point where I was feeling a little uncomfortable. I'm like, well, I'm not sure if I totally agree with everything that he's saying. And then it did get a little uncomfortable because everyone's going, yay. I'm like, well, I'm not sure. And you feel a little separate from people. I want to continue to say to us, that is so important. I took the time and I pulled back. I had to find out for myself, what did I think about these things? Where was I in all of this? And that is the power that we have to know as we're on this journey. We want to open to more and more energy, but we have to know that we are totally safe to say no at any point. I had a professor who did a lot of extraordinary healing work through guided imagery, but I loved him so much because always before we went into the guided imagery, while he was in the guided imagery and after the guided imagery, he would constantly say, and you have the right to say no. If this ever gets uncomfortable, I want you to know, are you uncomfortable? You can say no. This is only for you. And if you get a vision and you don't like it, you can say no. At any point, we can say no. And that's really important. Like, even if you don't necessarily, you feel all the energy, but it's too much, don't push yourself. Because they do say, this is why every tradition also says it's good to have an elder or a teacher, because that energy can be so, make you go a little nutty, because it's so big. It's so vast. It's hard to explain through words. That's why they always say you can't use language. That if you're not able to go with it, don't. Stop yourself. Say, I'm not ready for this. There's no competition here. We are not racing to a finish line. You are on your own journey. Softness of heart is about trust. And if you are not in a place of trust, it might be very legitimate reasons for your own past healing that still hasn't happened, wounding that happened, an external person that feels threatening, for any reason you are not feeling safe, say no. And do the work. Don't just say no and stop. So my great joy with having done this inner work and seeing Reverend Michael a few months ago is I had no stuff. I completely basked in the energy and the joy with no reservations because I had done all this inner work. And so now those things that had been bothering me were gone. Do the work, because the joy on the other side of that is extraordinary. This energy, this light, this power that is always available to us. It is always available to us, and it is always good. It gives us the space to do the healing that we need to do just to open up to more and more and more and more energy, to become more and more brilliant, beautiful, powerful lights of pure spirit.